Stalky Boy back with another video within your walls, and today we are talking about Halloween the game, and specifically the chances of Halloween the game's success. Both the long-run success and the more financial success. After all, if the game doesn't make money, there won't be lots of incentive to keep it going. The success of Halloween seems to be a bit up for debate, since some people think the game will last about 6 months, and others want it to hopefully last a very long time. But because of the track record with these types of games, people are worried. And that's what this video is for. I've seen a lot of misinformation being spread around regarding this, so I thought it would be fun to dig into this messy ball and unravel just exactly what we're looking at here. That, and I just really want to talk about Halloween the game. Before we dive into any of the player counts or any of that, we just need to fully understand how successful of a license Halloween can be. Like mentioned before, if game don't make money, game don't get to keep moving. On this front, we really don't have anything to worry about. I recently got into a conversation with someone on Twitter about this. I'm not entirely sure how common knowledge on how big Halloween is right now, so let me break it down. First, Halloween as of right now is the biggest slasher name in the industry. If you look at the numbers, this is very obvious. Halloween 2018 is the only slasher movie in history to have broken the 200 million threshold. In second place is Scream from nearly 2 full decades before it. This number gets even nuttier when you take some other things into account. I'm going to bring up Predator Badlands for a few reasons. One, it's one of IllFonic's other licenses they've had the opportunity to work on. And two, it's the license I was talking to the person on Twitter about. I promise this definitely correlates back to Halloween's success. When I mentioned that Halloween was much bigger than Predator, someone brought up that, nah, Predator's bigger. And then you bring up the box office numbers. And Halloween made a full $80 million more. This number is made even more impressive when you bring up other factors. One, Predator Badlands is a PG-13 film, and Halloween is rated R. Being PG-13 means Predator was open to a much larger audience, and it still didn't reach up to Halloween's numbers. And let's not forget, Predator Badlands had big man Disney in its corner. And as the commenter brings up, well, what about the rest of the trilogy? And while true, Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends didn't make as much money, it's important to once again remember that the Halloween films are rated R, and sequels rarely make as much money. Even without all of this, the Halloween sequels still did extremely well. Kills still being in the top 10 slashers of all time, and Ends pulling a good amount of weight on its end. Halloween has never been bigger. Halloween Kills' spot in the top 10 is also extremely impressive when you consider that it almost made as much as Scream's big return to the big screen. Scream has had this huge triumphant run in the box office, being the king of slashers in terms of pure numbers, and the fact that Kills, a sequel to Halloween, was able to almost compete with Scream 5's debut back into the big screen, that speaks numbers. But let's pull out a direct comparison. Another great way to see how excited the public is for a game is the announcement trailer. So let's pull up the numbers. Predator Hunting Grounds got a very respectable 2 million in 6 years. Halloween got nearly 3 million in 5 months. Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Friday the 13th both got about 1 million each. Yes, even the beloved Friday the 13th isn't competing with Halloween's numbers. Strangely enough, Killer Clowns from Outer Space got 2.5 million views. Now this is a game worth talking about. Killer Clowns isn't doing the hottest right now, but I don't think that's IllFonic's fault. Let's take a peek under the hood and see what happened with Killer Clowns. First off, when announced, it actually wasn't an IllFonic game. It was being made by a completely different studio. The game was sounding a lot bigger than what we ended up getting. Having tons of NPC characters for the clown to interact with, it was sounding like a PvPvE game, similar to what we're getting with Halloween the game. The large scope of the game ended up being too much for the studio to handle, and the game was delayed numerous times. Eventually, IllFonic was brought on board to get this game out. So IllFonic sort of just adopted the Killer Clowns child, and when it did come out, the game wasn't what was originally advertised. I can't say why that didn't end up happening. Maybe the older engine just couldn't handle it. It could be why IllFonic switched to Unreal 5 for Halloween the game. I'm not a game developer. I wasn't there. I don't have a concrete answer. We do know that sometime around the development of Killer Clowns, IllFonic was given the request to do Halloween the game, which I find to be pretty funny that this happened to IllFonic twice. Killer Clowns development not going well, call the guys at IllFonic. Halloween the game development not going according to plan, take the license from Boss Team Games and give it to IllFonic. Now, I don't entirely know when the license was given to Elphonic during Killer Clown's life cycle, how far it was in development. However, what we do know is that when Elphonic got Halloween, they put all hands on deck and transferred every single team to Halloween. This tells us so much about how Elphonic values Halloween. Halloween will get special treatment versus all of the other licenses that they have. And that's pretty great considering that they still update Predator Hunting Grounds 6 years later, still dropping new Predators into that game. In 6 years, that's a big number. That's a long time for this type of game to still be receiving content updates. But to get back on track with Killer Clowns the game, I think I hear every now and then is, well, don't expect much since Killer Clowns didn't get much post support. I think first off, looking at what we discussed just now, Elphonic putting all hands on deck for Halloween, the rocky development of the game, the very low player count, and the fact that Elphonic, despite all of this, still plans on updating Killer Clowns the game. I don't know how this went under everyone's radar, but Elphonic said a few months ago that they still very much plan on updating all of their titles except for Ghostbusters, and even then, they said that's on pause. So why the lower content drop? Because every single team is working on Halloween. At least that's what I'm picking up on, which is good news for us Halloween fans. If Elphonic ever decides to prioritize any of their projects, well, Elphonic has shown us what they're prioritizing. We've established based off the numbers we've seen, Halloween is very popular, is going to sell very well. So what about the long-term success of the game? This is, of course, a lot harder to predict, and there's a lot of factors to consider, but I want to quickly clear the room on something that people just don't really seem to get. This is Elphonic's game, not Gun Media's. Elphonic is the main developer and publisher, while Gun is a co-publisher. Gun does not call the shots on this game. This game will fully reflect on Elphonic. If you aren't a fan of Gun, then this should be good news to you. Gun joined the Halloween project pretty late into the game, while Elphonic has been on board for a very long time. This is probably the biggest misconception I hear all the time, so I wanted to just put that into the video. I've talked about lots of positives for Elphonic and Halloween the game, but I want to bring up what I think could be the biggest problem for Halloween if not approached correctly. That being post-content support. Nearly every single ASIM really struggles with a solid, consistent content flow. From what I mean by this is not just skins every now and then, or dropping a random survivor here and there. Let's look at Dead by Daylight for a moment. For the 9 years it's been out, as sure as the sun will shine once again, there was always a content drop every 3 months. It was always guaranteed we'd get new characters and sometimes a map. Something to always look forward to. This is something that I feel nearly every other ASIM lacks. A good, consistent stream of content, something people could always look at and go, yes, we're getting something this March. Behavior has been very good at roadmaps and getting our expectations ready for what's to come. Halloween needs to do something like this. It doesn't necessarily need to be 4 giant content updates every year, but it would help a lot if they told us what to expect so we aren't fumbling in the dark. Most other ASIMs, we would get a trailer out of the blue, but we weren't always sure as to how big the updates would be. For example, for Evil Dead the game, we got 1 additional map for its whole life cycle. We were told afterwards that maps are too hard and that they will just not do another one after they drop their first one. 2 demons and 5 survivors, nearly triple the amount of demons we got. And to only get 1 additional map, that's rough. An early establishment early on from what we can expect from updates would help it out a lot. For example, let's say 3 months after release, we get a DLC that adds onto the single player campaign a bit, we get Sheriff Bracket, and a new Myers variation. 3 months after release, I think that's pretty solid. Then 3 months after that, we get a Halloween 2 update, giving us a new map, Nurse Marion, Jimmy, a Lori outfit, and a new Myers variant with new executions. A much bigger update. And then the pattern repeats. 3 months later, we get a smaller update, and another 3, we get a bigger update. Another cool way to do it is have the bigger update, have a hero character, a Myers variant, additional content to the story, and a map. Smaller updates being like 1 or 2 characters with some cool executions. Consistency is just the real key, and I hope we get something like that established early on. I just want to rephrase that because I think it's really important. I also hope the updates are substantial enough, which brings us into the next concern. Ilphonic right now does have permission to go beyond the original movie and create their own story beats. This in theory means they could infinitely create their own Myers variations, which would be incredible and would absolutely keep us satisfied for a while. But of course, we also want to visit the iconic locations of the sequels. And once the sequels are on board, good lord, the amount of variety that could be had. With how the different variations of Myers are, the weapons they use, the more cunning Michaels, the more brute force Michaels, Corey, an evil variation of adult Jamie. The map variety you could have is insane. Going to, of course, the hospital from Halloween 2, Laurie's 2018 house, or her Ends house variant, the dance club in Ends, Haddonfield High in 2018. The school in Halloween 20 years later would be extremely different from everything else. The police station in Halloween 4, Sheriff Meeker's house in Halloween 4, the gas station from Halloween 4. If the sequel doors are open, there is a ridiculous amount of variety that could keep this game going for a very, very long time. If my idea of bringing in about 2 new sequels in every year was used, this game would have enough content for bare minimum 6 years, which is an insane degree of content right there. But of course, we are most certainly on the rise of a new Myers content renaissance. There is no way the guys at Trancas Interactive aren't cooking up a new movie for the big 50th anniversary, and of course the TV show we know that's been in development for quite a while now, and another, once again, the content that Ilphonic can make themselves not correlating to any of the sequels. All of this sounds fantastic, but can we get the sequels? Or the better question, can we get all of the sequels? First off, Ilphonic has already said that they are open to eventually branching off to the sequels, so they're on board for it eventually. So, Halloween's rights, like nearly every other slasher ever, are all over the place. So let's go into the easier ones and then some of the harder ones, at least to my knowledge. From the research I have gathered, it doesn't seem like it would be too difficult to gather most of them. The easiest lock-ins are Halloween's 4 and 5, as Trancas owns the rights to these 2 films completely along with the first, most certainly. After that, I've gotten mixed messages about some of the films, so let's go with the more obvious ones. Halloween 2 and 3 are owned by Universal, and they share the Blumhouse movies with Blumhouse. These movies could be the easiest to snatch after 4 and 5. Universal is willing to use Halloween 2 absolutely everywhere, and Jason Blum is definitely someone who would want to remain in a positive relationship with the Halloween peeps. He, after all, wants to do another Halloween film. He, in general, seems enthusiastic about horror, so I can't see him saying no to the films being in the game. Now we're getting into the really muddy territory. Halloween 6, H20, and Resurrection are all films I've gotten mixed messages on in my research. I read that Trancas has acquired the rights to all the Halloween films, but I've also heard these sets of films are owned by Paramount. Either way, I'm not too worried about these films being too much of a problem for 2 reasons. Recently, there have been 2 Halloween collections, and 6 H20, along with Resurrection, were included in these collections. And 2, if the game makes money, they'll want in on it. But that leads us to the last licenses, the Rob Zombie films. These ones seem weird. They weren't in the recent collection, have very little merch, they just seem to be the black sheep of the family. Not that they never get rep, you most certainly see masks and the occasional figure, but if you're a Halloween collector, they just seem to be left out of a lot of the big stuff. That's either because Lionsgate doesn't want to do too much with them, or the main license holder's Trancas doesn't really care for it. Either way, I would say out of all the movies, the Rob Zombie ones are the ones that look like they're in the most precarious position. But as I said, I was quite confused and was getting lots of mixed messages when trying to figure out who owned the rights to all these films. If anyone actually has a solid answer, please let me know in the comments. I'm very much curious. All in all, I would say the chances for sequels are pretty high, Halloween 2 being the highest since it literally takes place on the same night, so a lot of the aesthetics and resources they've been using would translate extremely easily to a Halloween 2 DLC. Every other Halloween film would take a bit more time to capture their particular aesthetics. I'd imagine the Blumhouse trilogy would be a pretty high priority as well, since that's the newest piece of Halloween media that's on everyone's mind, and Halloween 4 and 5 are just really easy for them to get since they already have it, so those are the movies I think would be the first pickings. And let's not forget, once again, Ilphonic can create their own unique stories. They've already been given the green light, so as long as it's received well, I can't see anyone telling them they can't add more. On top of all this, it's super important to mention that one of the higher-ups, Ryan Freeman, himself has said they have long-term plans for the game. So as long as the game is successful, this shouldn't be something to be worried about. On that topic, the big man Ryan actually engaging with fans and addressing concerns is not typical for a license holder. This is incredibly reassuring to see that the people on the top want this product to actually be good. That's most likely why the project was taken from Boss Team Games and given to Alphonic. They aren't settling. They want a project they're happy with. They don't want a quick buck. They want the long bucks. Them making a fully fleshed single-player game mode already is very indicative of this and extremely refreshing to see. The biggest bone I have to pick with this genre is the lack of single-player options, because one day the servers for these games will die, and that'll be that. Texas Chainsaw Massacre has a museum mode that plays nothing like the original gameplay, so when the servers go dead, the entire game is just unplayable. Unlike with what's going on with Halloween, giving it a fully fledged story mode, so even decades from now you'll be able to boot it up and live through the night he came home. As a horror fan, that is super nice. It's really refreshing to see that these experiences will be preserved, because there's nothing that quite captures the vibe of actually playing through these events. The movies are fantastic, but it's also really cool to be in those shoes, and you won't be able to do that with a lot of these. So it's just really great to see that our complaints have been heard and that they're actually giving us a full single-player story mode, which is something I hope they advertise more. We need to see more of this single-player content. The people really need to know that this isn't just another ASIM. It has a fully fledged single-player game mode that will hopefully get more updates as the game goes on. I really don't want to see the single-player game mode die out in favor of the multiplayer. I love ASIM games. I play them for a living, but I'm definitely more excited for the single-player aspect of the game. That's probably just the Halloween fan in me. I don't know if I would feel the same for any other franchise. Maybe Friday the 13th. Probably Evil Dead 2. A game can't last if it's not fun, though. And this is just something we can't know until we fully see more. We have gotten a comment from someone who has played the game, though. Matt, an employee from Gun, has said in a recent interview that he's played it, enjoyed it, and that if you like Gun and Alphonic games, you'll like Halloween. I'm most certainly in the camp of liking them more. Well, for the most part, Alphonic has a wide variety of games, and not every single one is for me. I enjoy Predator Hunting Grounds, Friday the 13th, and can have some fun with Killer Clowns. I'm a bit mixed on Clowns and Ghostbusters, though. From what we've seen so far, I think it's a pretty fair assessment to say that this game will be more similar to Friday the 13th, a spiritual successor. A different flavor of it, for sure, most likely being more tension-oriented, but I think it's safe to say that's the vibe they're going for. When asking most people what their favorite ASIM is, a good chunk of them will say Friday the 13th. A super beloved game within the genre. It's impossible to say for certain whether it'll be fun, but I think we're going to relive those glory days and then some. In terms of player count, I once again will point to Friday the 13th. Out of all the games that have released, Halloween is in a similar position. It'll probably have more players since it's just a bigger name at the moment, but I would imagine around the ballpark of Friday the 13th at its prime. And Friday to this day still actually has a dedicated player base. Despite it shutting down, you can still find dedicated Discords to having fun at Camp Crystal Lake. The more interesting tidbit is that before Friday the 13th shutdown, on PlayStation, it was extremely easy to find lobbies down to the very last day. And Halloween should be in a similar boat, all things considered. They're amongst a similar genre. Halloween just pulls in some more numbers. Halloween does have a few more things going for it on top of that. It doesn't require nearly as many players to start a match, being a 1v4 versus Friday the 13th to 1v6. It also will definitely have crossplay. Two huge things that will make it extremely easy to find matches. Alphonic is also the only ASIM studio that doesn't throw in the towel when things start getting bad. No matter how low the player counts get, they just seem to get content. Even Killer Clowns with the height of 18 players is still promised to be getting more content down the line, which is astonishing to me. Will it be as big as Dead by Daylight? Obviously not. Dead by Daylight can pull in an ocean from tons of different sources. That's just how it's built. Halloween's player count will go down, but it will definitely create a very loyal community that will keep the game alive. While we can't know for absolute certainty, I think Halloween is definitely in a safer spot than a lot of other ASIMs that came before it. I hope you all enjoyed this Halloween the Game talk. I know a lot of this is me rambling. I'm just a huge fan of the franchise and love talking about it. I was itching for a new topic to really discuss, and then this showed up on my Twitter. I couldn't resist. Regardless, I hope you all found it entertaining or educational. What boat are you in? Are you thinking Halloween will sink and die in 6 months, or do you believe in the boogeyman? If you don't, you should. Thanks again for watching, take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one.